Hello and welcome to the Void Century podcast. And Matt, I'm here today to bring you something a little bit different. Unfortunately, we're on break for One Piece this week, so we decided to do a deep dive into the worst generation.
Yeah, so I guess we'll just kind of list off the different members of the Worst Generation. We got obviously Luffy, main character. We got Marshall D. Teach, Trafalgar D. Law, Eustace Kid, Scratchman Apu, Capone Beige, Basil Hawkins, Zorro, X Drake, Killer, Jewelry Bonnie, and U Rogue. And I just gotta start off by saying there's three D's in the Worst Generation, so that's pretty interesting.
Oh, definitely. At least three of them. But we know that the D's play like a huge part in the history and, the future of the One Piece world. So I think it's only obvious that they would be on the list.
Definitely. Okay, so I guess the way that we're going to break down this episode is we're going to go through all of each of the members' devil fruits or abilities, their histories, and then their enemies and rivalries. And then we're going to end it with kind of like a power ranking that me and Adam both have in terms of who we think is the strongest and weakest of the worst generation. So I guess without further ado, Adam, you want to start us off with Teach?
Sure. Marshall D. Teach, better known in the series as Blackbeard, is the holder of a Logia type devil fruit, which we're pretty familiar with. He holds the Yami Yami no Mi, which is the Shadow fruit. One of his special abilities is he can literally turn himself into darkness and manipulate darkness. He can also create a gravitational pull, not unlike a black hole. One of his attacks is actually called Kurozu, which is black hole in Japanese. It's a void. He basically can control a whole pocket dimension. He can also disable devil fruits from other users just by touching them. So we saw with his battle with Ace, just by touching Ace, he was able to nullify Ace's flames and completely render Ace's devil fruit useless. But there is a huge caveat to the Yami Yami no Mi. Blackbeard takes extra damage, and he takes, like, I believe he described it as twice as much pain from every attack. So he has to be like a huge tank in order to be able to employ these moves properly. And in the story, the Yami Yami no Mi was the one fruit that Blackbeard read about in the Devil Fruit Encyclopedia that he decided that he absolutely needed to have to achieve his goals.
Yeah, so he also has the Gura Gura no Mi, which is the Quake fruit. It's considered the strongest Paramecia class devil fruit, and he stole it from Whitebeard. And I believe he used his Yami Yami no Mi ability to absorb Whitebeard's devil fruit powers. So that's potentially another ability of the Yami Yami no Mi. I'm not quite sure. With the Guru Guru no Mi abilities, though, he can basically create massive vibrations and generate shockwaves that can travel through almost any medium. We've seen it happen with ground, air, and water. And because he can do it with water, he can generate giant tsunamis. On the ground, he can destroy complete islands. Well, at least Whitebeard could. I'm not sure if Blackbeard quite has that level of ability yet, but he's had it for 3 years since the time skip, and I'm sure he's not as strong as Whitebeard was with the Devil Fruit, but he could potentially destroy an island with it currently just because he's had enough time with it. And yeah, it's one of the strongest Devil Fruits in the world.
So based on devil fruits alone, we would consider Marshall D. Teach, Blackbeard, extremely powerful in the One Piece universe, as to be expected considering he is one of the main antagonists in the story. Moving forward, the next person we have listed here is everybody's favorite. He needs no introduction, Monkey D. Luffy. In terms of devil fruit powers, I'm sure we're pretty familiar with it. Luffy has the Gomu Gomu no Mi, or the rubber fruit. And Luffy is basically a rubber human. His body's made out of rubber. He's really stretchy and springy. And throughout the story, Luffy's learned how to manipulate his devil fruit as he's used it more. He can blow air into his limbs. He can blow air into his bones. He can even manipulate the elasticity of his body to pump more blood into his heart, as we've seen with the various gear techniques that Luffy likes to incorporate. And Luffy also takes energy by winding up and by just launching his limbs back so that he has more ample room to accelerate and put more force behind his attacks. Now that Luffy's moved on in the series and we have the time skip, Luffy now incorporates hockey with his Gomu Gomu no Mi to make it extremely devastating. He has whole transformations based on how he manipulates his devil fruit using hakis to increase his abilities and the potential of his own devil fruit. Going forward, we know that Luffy's going to have a devil fruit awakening, probably not similar to what we've seen with Katakuri and Doflamingo, with the ability to physically manifest rubber around him or turn things into rubber. So it's going to be really interesting to see how Luffy's going to utilize his fruit in the future.
Yeah, and what we like about Luffy is just how creative he is with his devil fruit. Just is able to use his powers in different ways than we, the readers, or even his opponents would ever imagine, and kind of come up with surprise attacks and moves. And so we're going to move forward to Trafalgar Law. He's got the Opi Opi no Mi, or Op Op fruit, Operation Fruit. It's a paramecia type. With this, he's able to create a spherical spatial barrier around himself called Room, and it's kind of like a big sphere that kind of has like a blue hue to it. Inside this room, he can spatially manipulate anything such as people, weapons, or other items. He also kind of seems to have some type of telekinesis inside the room where he can kind of move things around at his leisure. We've seen him transplant people's hearts into each other and basically moving someone's soul into the other person. So he's able to kind of make his opponents confused with how they can operate in someone else's body. He can also use the room to clean cut his victims, and it won't damage them. It won't cause any harm or bleeding, and basically rearrange them as he pleases. You could theoretically also use the room for operations that will be life-saving operations, as previous users of the Op-Op fruit did. There's a special ability the Op-Op fruit has, which is the immortality operation. Using it will cost Law's life, but it will grant another person eternal youth. Which brings the question, has this happened in the past? And if it has it happened on Kaido? Has it happened on someone else we know that is actually immortal but looks young?
Cough, Im-sama, cough.
Right. And yeah, that's it for Law.
Yeah, so Law's another one of the D's in the story. So the first three people we talked about are confirmed D's. The next person we think could possibly be a D, but let's get into his powers. We, of course, have Eustace Captain Kidd. We know he has a paramecia type fruit. We don't have a name for it yet. It hasn't been specifically introduced. And basically, he's able to manipulate magnets and magnetic fields. So he's able to turn himself into a giant magnet and attract all the magnetic objects around him. For instance, we see him display this where he pulls swords and guns from Marines he usually fashions himself giant limbs out of magnetic objects. So he normally has a mangled iron arm completely assembled of cannonballs and swords and guns. And basically he likes to make a gigantic limb and swat people like they're bugs.
Yeah. Next we've got Scratchman Apu. He's got an unnamed devil fruit. It's most likely a paramecia type, and he can use it to transform parts of his bodies into various musical instruments. And depending on the type of instrument, it deals a different type of damage. So, for example, he can transform part of his body, in this case his mouth and head, into a cymbal, and he does the attack Shan, which is translated to cut in English. What this does is it allows Apu to release a shockwave that, heard by his opponents, will cut them. And similarly, he has another one that turns his belly into a drum, and the attack is Dawn, which is translated to explosion. And this one is, if heard by his opponents, it will cause an explosion on their body. And finally, the last type that we've seen him do is when he turns a part of his body into a violin or a string instrument and plucks them, it does the attack Bon, which translates, or Bone, I'm not sure, which translates to strike. And if heard by an opponent, it causes a blunt force punch like impact. And that's about it for Apu. So as long as you don't hear the attack, you don't take damage, which is interesting.
Yeah, Apu definitely has an interesting devil fruit for sure. The next person we have coming up is Capone Beige, who is the holder of another paramecia type fruit, named in the story as the Shiro Shiro no Mi, or the Castle Castle fruit, which is kind of a very, very interesting fruit. Beige himself can become a giant castle, but Beige himself is a castle. So Beige, just normally walking around doing his day-to-day operations, can literally hold his whole crew inside of him. And he also has the option to expand them and contract them as will, or at his own will. We see that people can literally leap out of Beige or fire weapons from Beige when he's in his normal human form. And he can also become a gigantic castle complete with like portcullises and arrow slits and drawbridges, any kind of like benefits that a normal castle would have. So Beige has lots of rooms inside of him which many people can occupy. He's in all essence a castle inside and out. Like he even has a throne room which while he's in human form he can occupy and like meet with other people. So he's got this weird kind of split personality and existence, if you will. Beige can also manipulate parts of his body into other parts of a castle. He can give himself tank treads. He can also turn his stomach into a drawbridge. His fruit actually has a lot of advantages, and the name of the castle that he turns himself into is the Big Father, and I believe we've only seen him go into it once in the story. And it's this huge, massive castle with extremely high durability that's enough to tank a hit from Big Mom. The only drawback is if the castle gets beaten up, Beige himself gets beaten up. So when Big Mom punched Beige and he was able to tank that attack, he did take a lot of physical damage as a result.
All right, so next we've got Hawkins. He is the user of the Wara Wara no Mi, or the Straw fruit. It's another paramecia, surprise, surprise. He's got the ability to create and manipulate straw at will. So one of the interesting properties of the straw he has is he can redirect damage. He can create a straw doll, kind of like a voodoo doll, and link it to another person. I'm not sure if he has to touch them to use this ability, but he is able to link it to that person's and store the straw doll inside his body. And when he gets slashed or attacked, he can redirect all the damage that would have gone to him into the straw doll, which in turn damages whoever it's linked to. Once this happens, that straw doll is used up and kind of pops out of his body. Another technique he has is he can surround his body with a large amount of straw to give him the appearance of a giant scarecrow, and it has metal nails that are like claws, and he uses it to attack his enemies. I'm sure that also it's good for defense because if someone attacks him, they have to get through the straw first before they get to him. It looks really creepy, by the way. I'm sure that all of you guys have seen it. Another interesting ability he has is while he's kind of in his human form, he can transform his blade into a whip made out of straw, and it allows him to have a bit of a longer reach and just have a whip-like weapon. He can create a large straw monster that is actually detached from his body as well. And this one comes out of his sword, which he's able to control mostly at will. It wields a large spike-covered club. It has the ability to spit nails at targets. And it also is seemingly governed by tarot cards that Hawkins draws, so it's not completely controlled by Hawkins in this regard.
So the next person up in the list is we have Roanoa Zoro, who needs no introduction. The first person on the list who actually does not have a devil fruit, so we broke our little paramecia streak we had there. Zoro is a very capable swordsman in this story, known for using three sword style. Zoro doesn't need three swords necessarily to fight, he just feels more comfortable with them. Zoro is an extremely capable swordsman regardless of the size or the amount of swords he has, as we've seen with feats such as slicing a man in a building in half with a little pocket knife, similar to a feat that Mihawk did when Zoro met him and faced him at the Baratier. Zoro is extremely capable in armament hockey, as we've seen after the time skip and training with Mihawk. He is able to coat his swords in armament hockey at will, and he has two named Owazamono grade swords. The first one is a Meito grade sword, being the Wado Ichimonji, formerly his friend Kuina's, which was bestowed upon him by his master after Kuina died. Rip Kuina. The second sword, which he just got, is Enma, which is also a Meito grade sword. It was formerly owned by Kozuki Oden, and it was given to him by Oden's daughter Hiyori. Enma is actually a very interesting sword, given that it has the ability to drain armament hockey from the user. So it's one of the other swords we've seen in the story that actually has like a special, if you will. So it's extremely adept at at drawing armament hockey and then manifesting it along the edge of the blade. And the third sword that Zoro has currently is the Sandai Kitetsu, which is also a Meito grade sword. It is the third Kitetsu sword, which Zoro got from Ippon Matsu's shop in Logetown, I believe it was. Cursed Blade, we've actually seen the Nidai Kitetsu currently in the story in Wano, which was made by Tenguyama. So yeah, Zoro is an extremely capable swordsman, and as of note, honorable mention for his swords. He also owns Shisui, which is a legendary sword from Wano, which was owned by the legendary swordsman Ryuma, which Zoro got when he defeated Ryuma at Thriller Bark.
Thriller Bark's still such a classic. We return to it so often when talking and discussing about One Piece. Moving forward, we've got X Drake. He's got the Ryuru no Mi model Allosaurus, or Dragon Fruit model Allosaurus. It's an ancient zone type. It transforms Drake into an Allosaurus, obviously, making him physically larger, stronger, and having more endurance. He's able to transform into a hybrid human form, as well as full beast form, as well as just human form. So he's got at least 3 different transformations under his belt, if you include his base human form. When he is in his Allosaurus form, he's able to use both his extremely strong teeth and jaws as weapons, as well as his tail to just slam opponents with a lot of power. Basically, just like a Zoan, like any Zoan we've seen, he's just an ancient Zoan, so typically stronger than a normal Zoan we might find in other places in the series.
So next up on the list, we have Killer, another swordsman who does not have a devil fruit. Killer is of note because he's pretty much the second mate of the Kid Pirates. He's known for dual-wielding scythes that are attached to his wrists that actually spin around. He's known as the Death Machine or the Murder Machine Killer. He's extremely fast, has insane speed and agility, and he always wears a mask over his face. I don't know the ramifications behind that besides defense and durability. We can also assume, based on his stature in a established crew in the New World, that he would have armament hockey similar to Zoro. And I believe he even exhibited that when he faced off against Zoro in Wano, but I'm not 100% on that.
That duel was pretty fun just because we didn't even know it was Killer at the time.
Yeah, we just saw this guy get wrecked and it's like, surprise, it was Killer the whole time.
All right, next up we've got Jewelry Bonnie. We honestly haven't seen too much of her. She's one of the least seen of the Worst Generation, but she's got an unnamed devil fruit that allows for age manipulation. She can alter the age of herself and others rapidly to age them to become older or younger into infants. So when they are aged, even if they're infants or elderly, they still retain their mental abilities. So like just because she transforms her opponent into a baby, they're still thinking like an adult or however old they actually are. We've also seen her manipulate the age of animals. I believe she turned some dinosaurs or birds into eggs, something like that. And it also seems apparent that in order to manipulate their age, she needs to touch her opponents, because we witnessed Marshall D. Teach capturing her and basically handcuffing her arms up in a way where she can't touch anything, and assuming that the reason that he did it that way was so that she couldn't change the age of targets. And that's it for Bonnie.
So the next up we have is somebody who we haven't really seen a lot. He does have a devil fruit which has not been named yet, and of course I'm talking about the Mad Monk Arouge. We know he's extremely powerful. His devil fruit allows him to convert taken damage into like a strength buff. So it's another one of those devil fruits that require that you be like a massive tank, but as he takes more damage, this dude just gets jacked. So his devil fruit literally allows him to be like the Hulk, where incoming damage just increases his rage meter, and his clothes start ripping, his pants start ripping, and he just becomes like this huge ball of muscle and just rains down vengeance upon his enemies. It's pretty cool.
Honestly, I feel like a Rouge versus X-Drake would be a really fun match just because they're both kind of more physical beings, and it would just be really fun to see them just beat up each other.
Totally. I'd actually like to see a Rouge fight Frankie in like a jacked muscle manly match.
That'd be a fun one too, yeah. All right, so we're moving on to a new section, which is kind of like history and trivia for the Worst Generation Pirates. And we're going to kind of go in the same order. So we're going to start off with Teach. So Blackbeard is a carrier of the Will of the D. He's a Yonko currently. We first saw him back in Mocktown at a bar drinking and talking with Luffy, and he kind of seemed like a mirror of Luffy. They are both really determined to fulfill their dreams, but they kind of had an opposite viewpoint of the world and how to go about achieving those dreams. We know that he's a former member of Whitebeard's crew. He killed Thatch. When Teach was a young kid, he successfully convinced Whitebeard to recruit him onto his crew. Even though Whitebeard was really not wanting to add him, he was still able to convince Whitebeard. Down the line, he leaves the Whitebeard pirates and he creates his own pirate group. One thing that he did was he turned Ace into the Marines. I'm thinking that it's because he wanted to become a Shichibukai. He's also partially based off of a real pirate. I think his name was Edward Teach. I'm not really too familiar with the backstory of the real pirates, so I'm not going to really add on to that. But that's kind of like a general history. So he's kind of like poised to be one of the main villains of the entire series. He currently is one of the main villains, I should say. And yeah, we know that there's going to be an epic clash between Luffy and Blackbeard sometime down the story.
So next we had on the list was Luffy, and unfortunately, if you've been following along with the story, you've already known half the stuff, if not all the things that Luffy's done so far. So we're gonna skip Luffy, and the next person we have is another D, and just as great and beloved by the community, we have Trafalgar D. Water Law. We first see Law at the auction house in the Sub-Body Archipelago with the rest of his crew, Beppo and Sachi and whatnot. We're gonna fast forward a little bit. So the next time we see Law, he actually saved Luffy after Marineford and resuscitated him, took care of him, got him out of Marineford, which was pretty unusual because we didn't have a lot of history with Law. Later down the line, in Punk Hazard and Dressrosa, we got a lot more backstory to Law. Turns out when Law was a kid, he came from an island that mined a substance called white lead, which the white government went all crazy over. But unfortunately, since everything was made with white lead, people got poisoned. And unfortunately, as a child, Law was poisoned and he was recruited by the Doflamingo family. So Law for a while was an underling of Doflamingo, and that's where he met Corazon, who was a member of the Doflamingo Pirates, but was also a double agent for the Marines. Long story short, Corazon and Law formed a bond, and they actually sought a cure for Law's illness. Turns out the only cure for Law's illness was the Opi no Mi, his devil fruit, which they had to double-cross Doflamingo and a whole bunch of other pirates to get so that Law could eat it, which ultimately resulted in Corazon's death. Law is allied with the Straw Hats currently, and he is a former warlord able to gain the title after sending 500 or 1,000 pirate hearts to the world government.
Cool. Yeah, Law's got a rich history in this series. He's one of the fan favorites, so he's got a pretty expanded history. Next up, we've got Eustace Kid. So going into the time skip, I believe he was the only pirate that had a higher bounty than Luffy in the Worst Generation. He was known for his brutality. During the time skip, he lost an arm and kind of replaced it with a metal arm that he uses his devil fruit power to just generate and create by scavenging random metals from various places. He's got some sort of beef with Shanks that isn't too, we don't know too much about, and he is based on a real-life pirate named James Kidd. So James Kidd is spelled with 2 D's, so there's a potential that he also is a D because maybe that second D can be his middle name. So we do know that Kidd is a very strong-willed individual, so he definitely has the makings for a D title. Not sure if he actually has it. He's kind of compared to Shiki from Roger's era, so yeah, that's about it for Eustace Kidd.
Yeah, Captain Kidd, cool character for sure. Next up on the list, we have Apu. Apu actually has a history with Kidd. He made an alliance with Kidd and Basil Hawkins to take out Shanks, and unfortunately, they met up with Kaido first, and Apu sold out Kidd and Hawkins to Kaido. So Apu is to blame for why Kidd was imprisoned by Kaido and why Killer was fed a smile fruit. So currently Apu is an underling of Kaido. We know that he's a member of the Long Arm tribe, and that's pretty much all we know about him for sure right now at the moment.
Next up, we've got Capone Beige. He's based off of Al Capone. He's like a mobster. It's really cool because he's kind of got like a room inside of his fortress where he invites people over and he just kind of talks with them like a mob boss. And it's just got a really good flavor to it when you witness it. He is married to one of Big Mom's daughters, Chiffon. Had sort of a had an alliance with her until he betrayed her, which he was always planning to do. But he genuinely loves Chiffon. He has a son with her, and the baby's really cute. It looks like a baby beige. It almost, I think it has like a beard, the baby. I'm not sure, but
A beer and a cigar.
yeah, and a cigar. So yeah, he allied with the Straw Hats to fight against Big Mom. He was always planning on attacking her or betraying her, but his plans were sped up because of Luffy being at Whole Cake Island and kind of disrupting everything. So he allied with Luffy during that, and he kind of tanked, like Adam said earlier, he tanked a few hits from Big Mom, which is really impressive. And he was able to withstand that to help the rest of his alliance to escape, so both the Straw Hat crew as well as Law's crew. Yeah, other than that, we know that he was able to successfully escape from Big Mom, and he found Chiffon's twin sister Lola and their father Pound. So yeah, he's been still doing things since the Big Mom arc.
Just castle things, man. The next person we have up, we don't really have a lot of history on. As touched on before, we're talking about Basil Hawkins. We know that he is currently an underling of Kaido. He was part of the alliance that wanted to take out Shanks. Based off of what we know about Basil Hawkins, just a couple fun facts is he's obsessed with clairvoyance and fortune telling. He's literally checks tarot as much as he possibly can when he's trying to find out a solution or a probability that a certain plan will work or that a certain person will survive. Interesting thing about Hawkins is, like Blackbeard, he's very motivated and very selfish. We've seen that Basil Hawkins would have died multiple times if it wasn't for him sacrificing his own allies with his devil fruit. And yeah, even furthermore, most recently, he was responsible for selling out X-Drake to the Beast Pirates for letting Law free in Wano.
Okay, next up we've got Roronoa Zoro. We don't have to get too far into his history just because everyone's pretty familiar with it, but he is one of the only supernovas besides Killer who is not a captain. He's a first mate though. So he, as a child, trained in Shimotsuki village at a dojo. He had a friend Kuina who was a girl that was actually stronger than him and would always beat him. And she had a tragic accident where she died, and they both shared the same dream of becoming the greatest swordsman. So he took her dream and kind of amplified his own dream and wants to become the greatest swordsman for the both of them. He also trained under the current greatest swordsman, Mihawk, during the time skip, and we know that he's learned hockey, I believe, under Mihawk. And yeah, I mean, I think that that's about as far as we want to get into with Zoro. We got his like kind of childhood and kind of basic training down.
By the way, I just want to say, so if Kuina was stronger than Zoro and Stairs were stronger than Kuina, does that mean Stairs are stronger than Zoro confirmed?
I mean, Zoro is known to have really poor sense of direction, so in that regard, swords definitely are greater than Zoro if he doesn't know where he's going. Yeah, I think that's it for Zoro.
Okay, so next up we have somebody in the story who we've seen more about recently, and that person, of course, is X-Drake. X-Drake was one of the people we met on Sabaody Archipelago. He showed off his mad devil fruit powers where he turned into an Allosaurus out of nowhere on the Sabaody Archipelago. Then he kind of went away for a bit. He was also part of Law's backstory. Come to find out, X-Drake's dad was actually one of the pirates who was trying to sell the Opi Opi no Mi, who got wrecked by Doflamingo, as far as I remember that correctly. X-Drake is a very interesting character. We knew he was a pirate all up until this point, but it turns out on the Wano arc, he is a Marine and he's affiliated with this background organization of the Marines called SWORD, which are affiliated with freedom over justice, at least in the sense of the world government. X-Drake was currently an underling of Kaido. actually rising very high up in the ranks to become a member of one of the elite guard, the Flying Six, and Kaido's crew, which are speculated to all have ancient Zoan kind of dinosaur fruits, if you will. And X Drake is another one of the pirates that's based on a real pirate, Francis Drake. So he's actually very important because he also has one of the tropes that a real pirate would have, which is an eye patch. So Drake is going to be very integral to the story for sure.
All right, we've got up Jewelry Bonnie next. Honestly, there's not much known about her past. We know that she has some relationships with Kuma. We've seen her protect a world noble that Zoro was about to attack in order to prevent Marines to come. She was also upset upon hearing that Monkey D. Luffy attacked a world noble, saying that if she ever sees the Straw Hats again in the New World, she would crush them there. So it seems like she has some sort of like affinity towards the world government or world nobles.
She was also extremely cut up over the death of Whitebeard. I wouldn't say she's like really like an ally of the world nobles, because after she saw what they did to Kuma, she was like pissed.
Yeah, true. So maybe that changed her mind.
She loves pizza.
She loves pizza. She was also at one point captured by the Blackbeard pirates and was offered to the Marines to be traded for a battleship as replacement.
And for a while, there was also a lot of speculation that Bonnie was one of Black Mom's daughter or Big Mom's daughters.
Yeah, I don't think that that's the case anymore. But yeah, there's not really too much details on Jewelry Bonnie currently. But she's an interesting character and she has a really cool devil fruit.
So the next one we have is another member of the worst generation that's going to be kind of short and sweet, at least in terms of history. And we have the Mad Monk Arouge. We haven't really seen a lot of Arouge. We know that based on his wings and his appearance that Arouge is a Sky Pian. We've also seen him on a Sky Island. Arouge was also one of the people who knew who Kaido was before Kaido was officially introduced in the story, because he sat there and watched Kaido try to kill himself, and he's like, oh, I know who that guy is. That's Kaido. I'm not going to mess with him. And we know that Arouge visited Big Mom in the past. They had some beef, and he beat the crap out of Commander Snack, who is no longer commander, and we can only imagine that the Mad Monk killed him.
Snack also had a bounty of 600 million berries. So the fact that Rouge was able to defeat him means that he's really powerful. Like, he is nothing to scoff at.
And the fandom also thinks he could be a D because he's got a D in his name. So Mad D Monka Rouge confirmed. So the next section we have is we're going to go over some rivalries and some enemies of the various worst generation crews and how they interact with each other. So the first person we have is Marshall D. Teach. We know that Blackbeard pretty much hates everybody, but he really hates the Straw Hats. He really hates Luffy despite killing Luffy's brother and everything else. Like, if he sees Luffy or a member of the Straw Hats, they're kill on sight. And he also feels the same way about the Whitebeard pirates. Of course, they wouldn't like each other after Blackbeard killed Whitebeard and then stole his devil fruit and then crapped on the remnants of Whitebeard's crew in the Payback War. So yeah, they don't like each other for sure.
So the next up is Luffy. And he's made a lot of enemies on his way to becoming the Pirate King. And these are specifically pirate groups that Luffy himself considers enemies. First and foremost, the Blackbeard pirates, led by Blackbeard himself, who was the reason why Luffy's older brother Ace was killed. So Blackbeard is really high up there on Luffy's list of people he dislikes. Next up, we've got the Big Mom Pirates. I mean, even before Luffy went to Whole Cake Island, he made big enemies with Big Mom by liberating the Fishman Island from her. Fishman Island was responsible for giving Big Mom a bunch of treats and treasures, and Luffy effectively claimed Fishman Island for himself, saying, I'm protecting you now, and you no longer have to give Big Mom these resources. So he developed that animosity early with her. She was already upset with them. And then they kind of were able to patch things up a little because part of Luffy's crew has Sanji, who Big Mom wanted to marry to Charlotte. Charlotte, what's her name?
Pudding?
Yeah, Pudding, sorry. And yeah, with that marriage, that was going to kind of seal the Germa family with Big Mom's crew. I don't think Big Mom actually intended to have a real alliance with the Straw Hat crew and was probably going to try to depose of them shortly after the wedding. But Luffy, being the way he is, was able to break up that wedding and break up that alliance that Big Mom was going to have. And in fact, get Germa 66 on his side in the process. So he upset Big Mom enough to have her follow him all the way to Wano and ally herself with the Beast Pirates. Speaking of, who is another enemy for the Straw Hat Pirates. Currently, he really dislikes Kaido because of how he affected Kozuki Oden and Momonosuke, who Luffy's really close with. I mean, obviously that's the current arc, so we don't have to dive too deep into his beef with the Beast Pirates, but needless to say, Luffy and the Beast Pirates don't get along.
The next person we have up on the list is also an ally of Luffy's, so they hate much of the same people. We have Law on the list. From Law's backstory, he absolutely despises the Doflamingo family, and if he ever sees Doflamingo again, kill on sight, due to basically Doflamingo killing Corazon and basically trying to ruin Law's life. And we know that Law also hates the Beast Pirates, and he's enemies with the Beast Pirates based on his alliance with Luffy and his close relationship with the Samurai of Wano and the Minks. So
also, the Doflamingo family was kind of underlings to the Beast Pirates. So at the end of the day, the Beast Pirates are kind of like the bigger fish of the Doflamingo family. So it's kind of like they're both really related.
yeah, you're right, because Kaido depended on Doflamingo for the smile fruits and for weapons, and Law went up the chain and basically took out Caesar and then took out Doflamingo, so Kaido doesn't have any more smile fruits, and he's really pissed off about that.
Next, we've got Eustace Kid. One of his rivalries is the Straw Hats. Just in general, like, it's just a rivalry. It's a friendly rivalry. They don't hate each other, but between him, honestly, you can even throw in Trafalgar Law into that, because him, Law, and Luffy all kind of have a big rivalry towards each other. Another one is the Red Hair Pirates that I mentioned earlier, but not much is known about that rivalry. I'm not sure if he actually hates the Red Hair Pirates or it's just more of a rivalry. And finally, we've got the Beast Pirates. He specifically hates Scratchman Apu for betraying him, but also he's really against the Beast Pirates for imprisoning him and kind of torturing him in their prison. And also he hates the Beast Pirates for what they did to Killer by feeding him a smile and making Killer always laugh. Something that Killer actually does not like to do due to his mysterious backstory. We know that, or it is revealed that Killer does not like to laugh and show that side of himself, yet now he is tragically forced to smile and laugh all the time. All the more reason to wear his trademark mask and hide his features.
Poor guy, I'm sure Chopper will fix him up. The next guy we have on the list is Scratchman Apu, who is, as an underling of Kaido, has huge disdain for the Straw Hat Pirates and the Heart Pirate and the Kid Pirates. So that whole group, that those supernovas and members of the worst generation who are under Kaido pretty much have the same enemies because they're currently at war in the Wano arc. So Hawkins and Apu really have disdain for the Straw Hat crew, the Kids Pirates, and the Heart Pirates.
Up next, we've got Gang Beige, and obviously the biggest one on his list is, or biggest enemy on his list is the Big Mom Pirates. His whole intention joining her crew or her alliance was to double cross and betray her. I'm not sure exactly what he has against her specifically, but we also know that the Big Mom Pirates don't like Capone either for taking one of Big Mom's daughters and also just betraying her. I don't think he has many other rivalries or enemies that we know of, but we do know he has the alliance with the Straw Hats as well as the Heart Pirates.
Next up on the list, we have Basil Hawkins, as I touched on before. Basil Hawkins is considered an underling of Kaido, therefore he has extreme disdain and is currently at war with the Straw Hat Pirates, the Kid Pirates, and the Heart Pirates. So outside of that current rivalry and all-out warfare, we don't really know much of his relationships with other pirate crews. So that's currently who he's at war with.
And now we're moving on to Roronoa Zoro. He's basically got the same enemies as Luffy just by being a part of the Straw Hat Pirates, so I'm going to skip over those crew rivalries. But we also know he's got a rivalry with Mihawk. He wants to be the greatest swordsman in the world, so he has to be stronger and be able to defeat Mihawk, which it seems like he's destined to do down the line. We know that he's got other kind of like smaller rivalries with Tashigi. I don't really think it's more of a rivalry more than just like an infatuation.
Zoro X Tashigi.
Yeah, and she just looks like Kuina, so he's got that going.
Next up on the list, we have X Drake. We know that X Drake, due to his past and the business with his father, has extreme disdain for the Doflamingo family, due to the Doflamingo family being responsible for his father's death, excuse me. You only die once. And then we have the Beast Pirates. X Drake actually betrayed the Beast Pirates because they were about to kill him in this current story arc. And we don't specifically know X Drake's motivation for betraying Kaido. But we know that X Drake initially sought Kaido out. So it's going to be very interesting to find out how that contributes to the story.
Yeah, and there's a good chance that when he joined Sword, they gave him the ancient dragon fruit Allosaurus, knowing that they wanted him to infiltrate Kaido's ranks. There's just that potential. We don't know for sure.
Yeah, we know that the world government has like options to get devil fruits, but I don't necessarily know if a member of Sword who might betray the world government is really going to be given that responsibility, you know?
Yeah. Moving forward, we've got Killer, and I think he's got kind of like a one-sided rivalry with Zoro just because they're both blade users. But I mean, we saw them fight and it was very one-sided because Zoro kind of took him on while fighting someone else at the same time and still was able to beat him fairly easily. He's also really against Lord Orochi just because Orochi's the reason why he had to eat a smile, and related to that, the Beast Pirates in general, because they're the ones who get the smile. So he doesn't like the Beast Pirates. And I'm sure he's got a bigger history, but that's really all we know about Killer in terms of his rivalries and enemies.
Next up, we have Jewelry Bonnie. We don't know a lot about Bonnie's past. All we know is that she hates the world government for what they did to Kuma. She hates Blackbeard for imprisoning her. And she definitely does not hate pizza.
Arouge. Honestly, I'm not too familiar with Arouge. You want to do this one?
Yeah, I would just say Arouge, we really don't know a lot about him, but it could just be inferred due to taking out Commander Snack and Big Bomb being the kind of person she is. They definitely have some kind of bad blood between them, and I'm pretty sure if the Big Mom Pirates saw Rouge or his ship at any point, there would definitely be more than words being thrown.
Okay, so we are on our last topic, which is power scaling and ranking all of the worst generations in a fight. And personally, I enjoyed kind of doing a little power scaling segment in our last episode, so I wanted to do it again. So hopefully you all like it. Let us know in comments if you guys enjoy the power scaling stuff and we can do more of it moving forward. So yeah, Adam, you want to go first?
Sure, yeah, definitely. So my power scaling list, feel free to disagree with me. I'm sure lots of people will. Currently, it's not necessarily in the story right now, but kind of where I see towards the end of it, because I did put Luffy over Blackbeard. I know that at the end of the story, Luffy's going to be stronger than Blackbeard. Luffy still has a whole bunch of things to awaken. I imagine Devil Fruit Awakening is one of them. Conqueror's Hockey 2.0. We knew at the end of the story that Luffy's going to be stronger than pretty much anybody. So I put Luffy over Blackbeard. Saying that, Blackbeard's number 2. We made a point to point it out that Blackbeard is extremely powerful in the story. His Devil Fruit is extremely overpowered. I'm talking about the Yami Yami no Mi, and then he has the Gura Gura no Mi as well. After the time skip, learning with it for 2 years, we can only assume that Blackbeard's gonna literally be a monster. And if the theories hold true and he shows up to Wano and he gets the world's strongest zone fruit. Blackbeard's gonna absolutely be insane, but thanks to plot armor, we know that we could put Luffy over Blackbeard. Then for the next one, feel free to disagree with me. I have Law. Law's extremely powerful. His devil fruit is absolutely broken. He can kill you if he wants to. He could just play like human dominoes or Jenga with you if he doesn't want to kill you. He can manipulate pretty much anything in his room, and he's extremely overpowered. The next one's kind of a wild card. Feel free to disagree with me because I'm sure lots of people will. But I have Kid. Kid's extremely powerful. We know that you can't really gauge somebody's strength based on their bounties, but I think compared to some of the other people in this list, especially who I have after him, I feel that Kid's devil fruit powers could completely nullify some strengths of sword users. I mean, because it's kind of hard to fight with a blade if you don't have a blade to begin with. So Kid, extremely powerful. I put him over Zoro. Zoro is extremely powerful too. I don't know. I think Zoro could be stronger than Law. I feel like they're all a toss-up. So Zoro's extremely strong, and he could definitely hold his own against anybody, including, you know, the top tiers of this entire story. Then we have Drake. We've seen recently that Drake is extremely powerful, as he's been shown to put up similar feats to Luffy currently in the story, with them both taking out a number in a single attack. Drake also being a high-ranking member and having an ancient zone in Kaido's crew, extremely strong. Then we have Killer. We see that Killer is extremely strong, but Zoro was able to punk him pretty much. Zoro didn't kill him, but Killer with the smile fruit is not really that good right now. I assume after Chopper fixes Killer up, we'll have a real one-on-one between Killer and Zoro, but we all know who's going to win that fight. Next we have Hawkins. I mean, offensively, I wouldn't say Hawkins is really the best we've seen, but defensively, he has one of the most overpowered fruits we've seen, because he can literally die multiple times, just dolls fall out of him, and gives him ample time to escape or subvert attacks from his enemies. Hawkins is very strong, but I see him more on the defensive side. Another defensive fruit and user we see is Capone Gang Beige. Beige in terms of offense from his fruit, yeah, extreme physical power, but not much else. We see that with his plan to take out Big Mom, he wanted to use Caesar's gas weapons, not necessarily the merits of his own fruit. So I would see him more cunning, and he would have to be more cunning if he can't take somebody out with overwhelming physical power. Apu, I would say Apu is relatively weak. We see that his strength lies in the diversity of his attacks and also the range of his attacks. But we've seen that Apu's fruit has some hard counters to it, such as not being able to hear it or just being out of the range. So Apu is relatively weak. I would put him over somebody like Arouge. I only put Arouge down there because we haven't really seen too much of him. We know that Arouge is very strong, and even beforehand when the supernovas were introduced, Arouge was kind of up there. But we haven't really seen too much of him, so we don't really know. We know that he is at least commander level, and he is relatively strong. So I would possibly put him over Apu. And then coming in last, I would have Jewelry Bonnie. Simply because we haven't really seen too much of Bonnie, but her fruit doesn't really seem suited to fighting. Her fruit seems more like subversion, intel gathering, that kind of thing. She's great support, but in terms of fighting people one-on-one, that's not really what she's designed for. So yeah, there's my power ranking. Feel free to disagree with me. Again, some of you might love it, some of you might not, but just here's who I put, and this is my reasoning. So let us know what you think.
Yeah, I disagree with it. So mine is obviously the correct power scaling. Thank you very much. Kidding aside, I do have a different power list for the worst generation, so I guess I will get into it. First up, we've got Blackbeard. I mean, to me, it's a no-brainer. He's got the ability to void other people's devil fruits. He's got a black hole ability, and he's also got the strongest paramecia fruit. He's got Whitebeard's old fruit. So not only does he have a strong defense in terms of being able to avoid abilities, like obviously he takes more damage when he takes damage, but he's also got one of the strongest offenses. And even though he's probably not as adept as Whitebeard was with the Gura Gura no Mi, he is still probably going to be really strong with it. Next up, I have Luffy. And again, this is actually based on current strength, not future strength. I apologize for not specifying that earlier when we were filling out this power scaling, so that's kind of my bad. But yeah, Luffy is next. We know he's really powerful with his Gear 4. He's got Armament Haki, he's got Observation Haki, he's got Conqueror's Haki. I don't think we've seen any other member of the Worst Generation with all three versions of Haki yet. Potentially Zoro might be able to develop all three as well, but we haven't seen it yet. So for now, it's just Luffy. With his different gear forms, especially Gear 4, having multiple forms, we know that he's got extremely good durability as well as power. Moving on, I've got Zoro. Zoro as the third strongest, mostly because him and Luffy are almost the same strength. Like, they're pretty interchangeable in terms of strength. They both have a similar level of determination as well. We've seen Zoro have really great feats with what he can cut. The only person we've seen him lose to, other than Kuina, was Mihawk, in a sword fight, that is. So yeah, Zoro's really strong. You did mention that Kid would be able to beat him potentially by magnetizing a sword, but I have a theory that just like how you can counter Logia users' Devil Fruit abilities with Haki, I think that Zoro can use his Haki abilities to prevent his sword from being magnetized away from him and kind of have a firmer grip on his weapon because it kind of becomes a part of him. Not confirmed, but that's just kind of how I feel would happen if he did end up fighting Kid. Next up, I have Law, and mostly because his Devil Fruit is really overpowered. By creating a room, he can kind of have full control over a space. Again, I think that Haki will counter this if you use Haki while in the room. I don't think you're gonna be, Armament Haki specifically. I don't think that you're gonna be able to be manipulated as easily, if at all, depending on how strong your Haki is. So because of this, I ranked Luffy and Zoro above Law. That being said, people who don't have that sort of immunity towards the room are going to really struggle against Law, and Blackbeard obviously has immunity with his Devil Fruit. So other than the three mentioned, everyone else, I think that Law could pretty easily defeat them in a one-on-one fight. Next up, I have Kid, mostly because Kid is one of the strongest of the Worst Generation and a rival to Luffy and Law. So I think that he's just going to be kind of on their level. So yeah, because he is seen as a peer with Luffy and Law, we've also seen him kind of have as much destructive capabilities as Luffy, like physical destructive capabilities. We've seen him make giant hands made out of metal, kind of like how Luffy is able to create or make his own hand giant because he's made out of rubber. So yeah, we just know he's got a lot of strength. He had a higher bounty than Luffy before the time skip. So we know that he's just really powerful. Next, I have Arouge. I have him placed higher because we know that he's defeated Snack, who had a 600 million berry bounty. He's really powerful. As he takes damage, he gets stronger. That's a pretty nice skill to have. I think that he would be able to defeat or to tank hits from other people. And eventually, kind of like you said, the Hulk. Just be able to Hulk down some opponents and just outpower them. Like tank the damage and then outpower them. And yeah, you probably wouldn't like him when he's angry. Next up, I have Drake. I just think that when he turns into a dinosaur, he's going to be really so powerful, strong endurance, and kind of hard to take on. Because of his additional endurance properties, he's going to be able to tank a lot of damage. I think that if he fights Arouge, he might lose just because Arouge might just get stronger to the point where he can just tank all of Drake's damage and defeat him. Also, I think Drake would kind of have a good time with Hawkins because, like, sure, Hawkins can kind of hurt him with his nails and sword, but, like, at the end of the day, I think that he'll just have a stronger endurance than Hawkins. Next up, I have Killer. I think that he's just kind of like a poor man Zoro. Zoro was able to defeat Killer without going full strength. But I think that he kind of counters Hawkins because Hawkins uses straw, and we know that blades can cut through straw pretty easily. I think that he wouldn't have too much difficulty with Hawkins, but with the worst generation members that I mentioned before, I think he's going to have a much more difficult time, and he just quite isn't there yet with his strength and hockey to defeat them. Hawkins, I think, isn't that strong personally. Actually, you know what? I'm going to move him down one. I think Beige is next. Beige is just really tanky. He can transform himself into a fortress, a mini fortress, or a large fortress. He can also apply tank wheels to his feet so that he can move really quickly. And he's just got tremendous endurance. Out of everyone here that we've mentioned, he probably has the strongest endurance. He taking multiple hits from Big Mom. He's got a pretty strong arsenal, literally an arsenal in his castle. So he's got some firepower to back it up. So between being able to tank and probably tire out his opponents and then kind of finish them off, I think that he's a really powerful member of the Supernova, both defensively, or especially defensively, but also offensively. Next, I have Hawkins. I think that Hawkins just isn't as physically strong to defeat the previous members that I mentioned already. I think that he does have really nifty abilities where he can kind of tank hits and transfer that to other people that he made straw dolls out of. And I think that the straw dolls, what they can tank is related to how strong the person they're linked to is. So let's say that he made a link with Luffy or Zoro. They're going to be able to tank a lot more hits than if Hawkins made a doll out of someone who is weaker, like, let's say, Bellamy. He's also kind of got the weakness of following whatever his tarot cards say. So if his tarot cards say to do something, he doesn't really have his own agency to choose his own fate. He just kind of follows these cards blindly and going by probability. So in terms of decision making and coming up with plans and stuff like that, I don't really rank him that high. Next up, I have Apu. I agree with you. I think he's just one of the weaker of the worst generation. Obviously, he's still pretty strong because he can still deal a good amount of damage to Luffy, like we witnessed earlier in Wano arc. But at the end of the day, I think that all the other worst generation members, aside from Bonnie, is going to be able to take him out. Finally, we have Bonnie. She's just kind of like a one-trick pony where she can age or turn someone younger. So it's just really limited because she needs to physically touch them. And I mean, everyone else kind of has ways around her physically touching them. So as long as she doesn't catch them off guard, she's gonna pretty much lose to any of the other worst generation members. So yeah, I kind of talked for a long time on that because we have to kind of talk about our reasoning. So yeah, that's basically my power scaling. I don't know, do you want to talk about what we agree or disagree on with the power scaling, or should we call it for a day?
I mean, if you want to, I just think that we both had two different kind of expectations on the standpoint of like the timeline of the power scaling. It's fine, but half of the fun in it is just being able to like lay it down and give your reasoning. I mean, I'm not too serious about it. I know that you're going to disagree with me and other people are going to disagree with me, but that's like the whole point of the community is like nothing's been 100% fleshed out, so it's cool to speculate, and not everybody has to be right all the time, and that's okay too. So
Yeah, this is just a fun, speculative power scaling, power ranking for the worst generation that we did. So we hope you enjoyed it.
yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed like the backstory and this little deep dive segment. I know this is something different than what we've done in the past, but I hope you enjoy it. And yeah, this has been the Void Century podcast. It's been Ed and Adam. If you want to find us, you can look for us on Instagram and at Twitter at the Void Century PC. If you want to hit us up on email, you can reach out to us at the Void Century Podcast at gmail.com. You can find us at the Void Century Podcast at wherever you listen to podcasts. Thank you, and thanks for sailing.
Bye.
Bye.